chances are, if you've heard of intermittent fasting, it's been presented to you as a great way to lose weight. And most people think that intermittent fasting is some kind of diet. Both of these ideas mean that we have a misunderstanding of intermittent fasting, which then means that we're not going to make it a sustained part of our healthy regime and the way that we're trying to take care of our bodies. To start, when I was presented the idea of fasting, it was through the lens of feasting and fasting cycles. And now we're talking about what we used to do hundreds of years ago. And the feasting period was typically very short, based on the size of the animal that we've caught, or based on the amount of fruit on the bush or tree that we might have found. So due to limited availability of food, feasting made sense because we didn't have a way to freeze or preserve any of this stuff. So what we needed to do was eat what was in front of us. And also fasting was the only thing we could do because when there wasn't any food available, we had nothing to eat. Today, we figured out how to pair fasting with grazing like cows, right? We eat constantly due to our invention of something called the snack. And that means that every opportunity that we have to put something in our mouth, we can. And that invention has actually led to our obesity crisis because unfortunately, we graze all day long. Fasting through the night is not long enough or even intense enough to use up all the energy that we store during the day from our constant grazing. And so what happens is we believe the answer is to fast longer, right? Just extend the time that we're fasting. The problem is, how many hours would I actually need to not eat to get rid of the weight that I'm storing every single day? I see 4 major problems when we use fasting for weight loss. The first one being, we are focused more on when we're eating than what we're eating.
The foods that make fasting hard. The first is anything that put your blood sugar on a roller coaster ride. So these are your refined flours, your refined sugars, which are your cakes, your cookies, your pastas, your breads. Second thing you're going to want to avoid is any food that makes you insulin resistant. These are your canola oils, your cottonseed oil, your corn oil, your partially hydrogenated sunflower, safflower, vegetables, soybean.
If you're eating high carb foods when you fast, as we just saw, you are going to struggle because you're going to be hungry while you're fasting. And if I'm hungry while I'm fasting, now we're talking about a situation where I need to be I'm going to be very uncomfortable while I'm fasting. How well do you manage being uncomfortable, right? What's your current behavior when you feel hungry? I know that in my history, when I was hungry, my automatic action was go find food. So many of us will reach for our purse, our drawer, or the nearby spot that we keep our snacks to make sure that we eat something when that hunger hits because we don't like being hungry. The fact that we prepare in advance for occasions where we might be hungry by having snacks available tells me that this process that I'm doing of fasting and then turning around and still eating normal food means that while I'm fasting, I'm going to be unhappy with this fasting process. It's going to feel very intense to me because I'm not used to being hungry. And I see this as the number one reason that I will end up not being able to sustain this long-term into my future and maybe not even do it good enough to lose the weight that I'm trying to lose. All of this around the idea that I hate being uncomfortable, I hate being hungry. Now, I wasn't surprised to learn that most people choose a fasting regime that's a 16-8. And that's the second problem that I see, which is that if I'm using a 16-8 fasting regimen, That means I'm leaving myself 8 hours during the day in which to eat. So yes, I will need to maybe skip breakfast or, like have breakfast later and have supper earlier or something. But I will, generally speaking, get to eat for 8 hours during my day, whatever I want. And now that means that because I don't have any restrictions on what I'm eating, I still have the opportunity to eat cookies, cakes, chocolate, all the things that we just learned were not healthy for us to eat and not going to help my fasting routine. I was disappointed to see that another method that they talked about was the twice a week method, which means you get to eat normally for 5 days. You're supposed to eat healthy, and then you're fasting for 2 days. Now, in the 2 days that you're fasting, though, you're eating 500 calories of food in 2 meals, so 200 calorie meal and then a 300 calorie meal. But if I'm fasting, but I'm still eating, that's not fasting. So basically, I don't really believe that these methods that they're talking to us about, even the alternate day fasting, which was eating 1 day normally and then 500 calories on the alternate day, you're still ingesting food. So I'm questioning their understanding of fasting. Now, the other problem that I have is on the days that you're eating less energy than your body requires, because the average person needs more than 500 calories in a day. I'm guessing this is why they're calling this fasting. But what happens when I put my body in a position where I'm not feeding it enough? My body has a tendency to, first of all, get used to this. So it starts to expect that for some reason, every X number of time, I'm getting less energy than I need. Less energy. So most people can manage skipping a meal because they're adequately engaged, right? So if I know I'm doing stuff, I can skip a meal. But if every X day, so let's say every Saturday, I'm eating much less than my body needs, what happens to us in those scenarios? Because I can tell that that day is coming because it happens every Saturday. Right? And then when that day arrives, because this is happening where I'm going to eat, but not enough to be satisfied, we have repercussions.
I'd like to tell you about an experience that I had during World War II as a guinea pig in an experiment in semi-starvation. The average daily intake was 1,570 calories. It wasn't long, however, before we began losing our will to do anything that required energy. I thought about food all the time. We became very irritable and intolerant. We'd been told before the experiment that the food might become monotonous, since there were only 3 menus. But it was far from monotonous. It was food, and any food tasted good. One of the first effects of semi-starvation was the loss of interest in women. Sometimes we'd go to the movies, but even that became more of an effort than it was worth.
Now, obviously, 500 calories once or twice a week is not the same thing as 1,570 calories every single day for a 6-month period. The problem is, because we're eating just not enough to satisfy the day, psychologically, we are going to be hungry and looking for food. Because actually, on the other days, we know what it's like to eat normally. And on this day, we're not eating nothing. We're eating less than the body needs. And I need you to understand that's not the definition of fasting. Our bodies adapt to what they're given. That's why Jim reported feeling tired, cold, uninterested in activities. His body was slowing down so that he could conserve energy, because obviously there wasn't enough food to sustain this higher level of energy that he normally was using. And when no food comes in, there's some really impressive benefits that occur after about 18 hours of no food coming in that don't occur if I'm still letting a little bit of food come in.
After 18 hours, your body starts making glucose from other things. That's called gluconeogenesis. And at the same time, we continue the shift away from glycogen to fat. And around this time, you have something called autophagy kick in. Autophagy is one of the few things that can start really cleaning up, but if you never go 18 hours without food, then you will never really experience autophagy. Around this time, you also start seeing some higher levels of ketones. Ketones is a byproduct of fat, and it's something that the body makes as an alternative fuel source for the brain. You will also see some increases in two super important hormones. If you're interested in brain health, human growth hormone and brain-derived neurotrophic factor, and there will also be some immune benefits at this point.
What we're doing is we're ignoring the fact that the body actually has glycogen stores that can fuel us for 24-ish hours, like if we were to deplete them to zero. Now, your body's never going to deplete it to zero. Here's the problem, though. By eating and then fasting for only 16 hours, it's not long enough to get us to that fat burning stage that we are all trying to have happen. And even if we fast till 18 hours, that's just the beginning of that fat burning stage. Fasting is really healthy, and scholars have promoted it throughout history.
A lot of great thinkers have commented on fasting and had something to say about fasting. Hippocrates said, "To eat when you are sick is to fuel your illness." Pythagoras required fasting of his students, okay, so they can think more clearly. Plato, Aristotle were advocates of fasting. Ben Franklin said the best of all medicine is rest and fasting. Mark Twain said, "A little starvation can really do more for the average sick person than the best medicine and the best doctors."
But what I want you to pay attention to is that none of them were talking about weight loss. They were talking about the mental clarity and the focus that we get when we stop eating. Because fasting is not a weight loss hack. It's a health boosting technique. And if we use that health boosting technique appropriately, we get amazing benefits.
There are many good reasons to do prolonged fasting that go way beyond just weight loss. Number one, your cognitive function, your sense of clarity, also your mood. You're not as grouchy. Prolonged fasting can actually fix your immune system. If you have a body problem, whether it's diabetes or some other degenerative condition, prolonged fasting can help.
Now, of course, if we fast, we will lose weight. There are many people who do intermittent fasting routines without addressing the foods they're eating. And what we see is that they attain limited results. And the reason they attain limited results is because the foods they're eating are actually undoing the positives of the fasting. I've heard so many people that say things like, "I tried intermittent fasting and it worked for a little while, but it wasn't sustainable." And the reason it's not sustainable is because intermittent fasting isn't a diet. So when I'm using this healthy way to clean up my body's internals as a way to lose weight, what I'm really doing is trying to force my body to lose weight when during that period of time, it's not even caring about losing weight. It's caring about possibly cleaning up damage that's been happening in my body because of the unhealthy foods that I've been eating, right? Intermittent fasting and longer term fasting is a process to give your body a rest from processing food so that it can clean up the internals and do whatever it needs to do to remain healthy, because your body wants to be healthy. And if you fast and then turn around and eat junk food, candy, fast food, processed food, garbage, then that's like painting your wall and then turning around and using a hammer to poke holes in it. You're just going to have to plaster and repaint the wall and then turn around and and if you just keep doing that, you're absolutely harming the wall. What we learned from Dr. Peltz is that these foods, these highly processed, garbagey foods, are causing illness. And Dr. Ekberg went as far as to say that 90% of our diseases, including cardiovascular, diabetes, high blood pressure, metabolic, are all caused by the overconsumption of high carb foods and the excessive fat storage that we are doing repeatedly. Now, ultimately, if you want to fast successfully, starting from a high carb diet puts you at a disadvantage, Wellness Warrior. And what I'm suggesting is that you watch this video on the screen right here that's going to help you to stick to a healthy keto diet so that you can fast, clean up your internals, and have the happy, healthy life that you're actually trying to accomplish. So click on the link. I'm going to meet you over there.